have the Retro Gaming Roundtable.
The Retro Gaming Roundtable.
The Retro Gaming Roundtable.
The Retro Gaming Roundtable. Hey everyone, it's Jason from Kinda Cool. And tonight we're going to be doing another Retro Gaming Roundtable. We got the standard group of friends here ready to go. And tonight we're going to be talking all things Turbo Grafx 16/PC Engine. So I think it's going to be a fun topic. We're going to kind of take a look at where we were with it when it came out and circle back and take a look at it now as a retro gamer collector. So we're going to kind of see the progression there of our thoughts and opinions and just overall, ideas about the game. And spoiler alert, I don't think it's very big of a spoiler alert, but we all kind of like it, right? Don't we?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
So we're going to talk about that. We're going to get into that. But first, let's introduce everybody here on the roundtable. And first off, we got Lyndon from Old School Games and Stories. Welcome, Lyndon. There we go.
Oh.
We've got the new master of YouTube shorts, Mark from Dad Racer. Welcome, Mark. And we've got the master of PC retro gaming lately, Joel from the Poor Man's Retro Game Room. Welcome, Joel.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I think everybody, you excited about the topic tonight or what?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
This is kind of like a series that we kind of thought about doing. It's called Consoles We Love, and we're going to start with the Turbo Grafx 16 and PC Engine. What better place to start than there? But first of all, let's do some YouTube shout outs, right? So let's do that. And I'll start it, right? So I'm going to start with Bilbo Baggins, right? And I think we all kind of encountered him from the same thing. He does these really awesome vinyl collection, these limited edition vinyls from soundtracks from games, 8-bit, 16-bit, whatever. And he'll kind of play it concurrently with a rig that's showing the game. And how cool is that? I think everybody kind of fell for that at the same time. And he kind of joined our retro collective group, and it's kind of just the rest has been history. But if you haven't already checked his channel out, go check it out. He's got some really cool, unique stuff going on over there. And he's really kind of branching out and doing all sorts of stuff now. But watch that vinyl stuff because that's really cool. So that's my shout out for this week. That's Bilbo Baggins. So what do you think, Lenny? You got a shout out this week?
Yeah, but I got to agree with you with Bilbo Baggins there. I did not even know that they made vinyl albums of retro game soundtracks until I met him. Never knew that was a thing. So how cool is that?
Very cool.
My shout out this time is to one of our friends across the pond, Mark Goes Blind Gaming.
Mm-hmm.
Now here's a guy again, like Bilbo Baggins, that has the gameplay going, but has his own skits and edits and stuff that he's talking about going on while he's playing the game. And it's very humorous. There's no way you can watch his videos and not laugh. And he is up for YouTuber of the Month this month. Hosted by our good buddy Chris from the Real Bit Wars. And he is doing an outstanding job this year going through the history of the competition. It's great. So go check out both of them.
Yeah, he's keeping up the legacy over there and doing a great job with that for sure.
Absolutely.
He's knocking it out of the
Great
park.
job.
Good stuff. All right, Mark, you got a shout out?
I do. Actually, I have three. I'm going to cheat this time.
3?
On the PC Engine episode here, I got to cheat and do 3. So I have some props here. I'm going to try to keep my rant short, but everything I have around me tonight is really thanks to 3 special people. One, Josh from Playmore Games. I'll touch on the story here. He had a broken system that he got, one of these parts or repair things. He wanted to see if I was interested in it. And I said, yeah, what's the worst thing that can happen? So I took the system. He sent me a couple of games to try if I do get it working. I kind of tinkered around with it a little bit. I wound up having a communication phone call with another YouTuber, Juliet in India Mobile, who we've shouted out in the past. He really walked me through troubleshooting, and guess what? We got this PC Engine fired back up, working like brand new, and I've been in love with the system ever since. Then a little while later, a box shows up in the mail. Okay, I get a care package from another special person, Graphics Gear. He sent me just a stack of games. He sent me extra controllers, sent me a multi-tap. I really am so thankful for all 3 of them for getting me into this system, because if it weren't for all 3 of these guys, I wouldn't, have touched the PC Engine, or wouldn't have any of this stuff that's sitting around me tonight. I'll get into it a little bit more in the episode, and I just wanted to do like a brief thank you to all 3 of those fine gentlemen.
And I believe you're on Graphics Gear's Christmas card list too, aren't you?
Exactly. Up here, I think in the corner, of course, you know,
Yep.
with the way the camera is, who knows what I'm pointing at, but there is a Christmas card up there that came right around the holidays with this care package, and it's awesome. It's got
I had mine in the
PC
mantle for a while, so I got one too. So good.
Very
good
talented,
deal,
by the way. Very talented individual. He does overlays of controllers. Little shout out there. He does stuff like this. Beautiful, beautiful work. Graphics Gear. But maybe I'll get a chance to show that off later.
Agreed, man. Good stuff for sure. Check that out. All right, Joel, what do you got for a shout out?
I got man, that's a tough act to follow. First of all, that was
Absolutely.
awesome. Great story. So it's cool to see kids kind of get into the retro scene, and I think retro games are in pretty good hands, especially if you watch this kid's videos. But it's Jason's video game secret. He has a lot of some really good retro stuff, and it's from a point of view of a young kid, a younger kid, younger than us, but that's not hard. But but he's got some really good content. He did a really great SNES $100 challenge, and it was fantastic, man. This kid has it all. He's got the charisma, he's got the video editing skills, and he's got the knowledge as well. So check out Jason's video game secrets.
Awesome.
He's got the right
Good
name
one.
for sure, right?
Yeah.
Can never have too many Jasons.
No.
All right. Well, great shout outs, guys. I agree with all those for sure. But I think it's time to get into our discussion. So let's talk about all things Turbo Grafx. And I'm going to try to compartmentalize this conversation the best I can, because this can very easily get all over the place. So let's start with the Turbo Grafx 16, the North American US version, this guy right here, this classic edition right here. And then we'll kind of work our way out from there. We'll talk a little bit about, hey, there we go. There's another one. So we'll work our way out from there, maybe get back to the PC Engine and all things in between, somewhere in between there too, right? So anyway, I'll start off with it. I'll kind of give a little spiel. Now, we're not going to go into all the technical details of this machine, but we'll probably talk about some things. But I did want to give a kind of quick overview of it, because this was actually released back on August 29th of 1989. That's quite a while ago, right? And if you think about it, that was only 2 weeks after the Sega Genesis debuted. So really, those kind of were like the opening shots in the console war, were they not? Like kind of the beginning of the console war started right here with the Sega Genesis, kind of hand in hand, right? So it was really important machine in that respect. But let's just kind of take a look at it. And obviously, looking at it, it's not the world's prettiest machine, I would say, but it's definitely not the world's ugliest machine. And you can say that stuff doesn't matter, but back in '89, when this thing first came out, it did matter. When you're a kid, and you're looking at what console you want to buy, you usually can't get them all. So you want one that look cool, right? I don't think this looks terrible. But there are some deficiencies there. There's some detriments here we want to talk about. And first and foremost, see if I can get my finger in the right spot here, but there's only one controller slot right here. And that's a big deal, because by then we'd already standardized on two. So I'm not exactly sure why NEC thought they could get away with doing a single controller port, but there is the turbo tap that attaches in there and gives you the ability to do 5 more, right? So there was that, but a little wonky, a little wonky. And I would also call it the fact that there's no reset button on this either. And that was kind of one of those things where by then the reset button was pretty standard. So
Yeah.
see, it felt a little low rent from the feature side of things, right? Just a little bit, not terribly, but it did factor in. And I also, at the time, it wasn't that big of a deal, but it was RF only. And that's the bane of every retro gamer's existence now, is trying to deal with these RF systems. At the time, it wasn't big of a concern. And there were some things, I think it was called the turbo booster. They were really getting a lot of use out of that turbo. That was kind of like one of their 90s tude words, I think, right? Kind of like extreme turbo. So we had the turbo tap that would allow you to get composite video out, and I think stereo RC out. So I don't know how many people bought that back in the day when it's big of a deal. But anyway, compared to its kind of contemporaries, there are some things going on in here that made it a little bit off, right? And then the whole argument, the elephant in the room, that's usually when you talk about this is it truly a 16-bit system? Everybody brings that up, and we won't get into that. It's a little too tech geeky for us here on this conversation. But I will say that the core CPU is only 8-bit, where the graphics is 16. But man, when you play this thing, for all intents and purposes, it feels like a 16-bit machine, and that's really what matters.
Yep.
So that's my kind of take my spiel about the kind of the overall aesthetic and looks of the machine, and some basic stuff about the technology. When I saw this when it first came out, I had it in, I was considering it, man. I was moving off the NES, and I was looking hard at the Turbo Grafx, and I don't really remember a commercial really coming out that caught my attention, but I try to consider myself kind of a well-versed shopper. And so I was buying all the magazines, in preparation for what was going to be my 16-bit choice. And this one did have some interesting points to it. But Lyndon, what did you think in 1989? I mean, where were you in life when this thing came out with your gaming career? And were you considering picking one up? Did you pick one up?
No, I did not. I vaguely knew anything about it until some friends of mine got one. I had some friends. It was three brothers. Our parents were friends. We would go over there a lot on Sundays. Our parents would watch the race together.
Cool.
And they had a Turbo Grafx 16. They are the only people I ever knew growing up that had one. And I vaguely kind of remember some commercials. I knew what it was when they got it. But that is the only time that I ever got to play one growing up. And they had Bonk, Keith Courage, Golden Axe, and Splatterhouse. That was the four games that I remember playing back in the day. And that was the only time I ever played it, just for, a brief period in time there. I didn't play it again until about a year and a half ago when I made a big trade with you for it, Jason.
Yeah.
I come up with something he couldn't refuse, and I took his extra Turbo Grafx and the Crix EverDrive.
Nice.
So I got to tell you, this has really hurt me shopping for Turbo Grafx games, because I'll see them every once in a while.
It's helped you.
Yeah. You're right. I'll tell you why in just a minute. I see them out in the wild here and there. They're very sparse, but you do see them. And of course, on eBay, you come across, there's still some deals out there. But I'm like, well, I really don't need it. I got an EverDrive. This is not even emulation. This is the real deal. So I'm a really big fan of this. I highly recommend the EverDrive, because when I got it, I knew nothing about the library. It's not something I've really studied up on. And as I started going through it on both the Turbo Grafx and PC Engine side, man, I found these really fun games. I'm thinking, man, is this something I should pick up sometime? Get a real copy of it? And I pull up price chart, and I've not studied the Turbo Grafx. I didn't know. I'll pull up the game I'm playing and be like, nope, never mind. Glad I got the EverDrive, because I have been able to enjoy. I wrote down a list here of some games.
All right, hold that list, because we're going to go over games in a different section. But
all right,
keep that in mind. Keep that in mind.
That is kind of my experience up to this point. Brief little period as a kid with my buddies that had one. Didn't see it again for 30 plus years until me and you made the trade. And then the last year and a half, I really dove into both libraries, American and PC Engine. And oh my goodness, what a blast it has been.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So Mark, where were you in 89 when this thing came out? Did you have eyes on the Turbo Grafx when it came out in 89?
No, I'm an 84 kid. I was whatever grade I was in. I was in kindergarten or something like that. So no, I wasn't aware of this. I was in a Nintendo neighborhood, I think. I had a Nintendo at the time. Everybody in the neighborhood had a Nintendo except for one kid had a Sega Genesis. Used to go over there to get some exposure to that, playing Streets of Rage. I've touched on that previously, but no, I never heard of the Turbo Grafx 16. This stuff wasn't, I wasn't aware of it until many years later, getting back into retro video game collecting and stuff like this. But boy, like I said, I got this system 4 or 5 months ago with the help of these three guys that I shouted out. After breathing life back into this, I've been having a blast playing some of the games that Graphics Gear sent my way. Graphics Gear and Josh from Play More Games, he sent me Splatterhouse. Love Splatterhouse. I love playing Bomberman with my daughter. We were just playing that earlier this evening with the Turbo Tab. I call it the multi-tab. You call it the Turbo Tab. Is that the technical name? See, I don't really know.
Yeah, exactly. Is anybody really wrong? I don't think so.
Yeah, right. Josh sent me this. This is like the most necessary accessory there is with this system, and that is the extension cable for the controller. So another plug for Josh there. Thank you, Josh, from Play More Games, for sending that my way. Overall, I'm very, very new to the system. I'm learning a lot. I did get in the mail, coincidentally, today, serendipitously, one of these EverDrive carts. And
perfect timing.
I popped that in about T-minus 6 seconds after taking it out of the package, and really been enjoying a lot of stuff. I know we're getting into games later. And yeah, I love the system. What can I say? It's a cute little system. I don't have the Turbo Grafx American one. I just have this little guy here, and I absolutely love it. It's total new frontier for me in gaming.
All right, awesome. All right, Joel, what about you in '89 when this thing hit? I know you're a big Sega guy, but did you have flirty eyes at least a little bit for the Turbo Grafx?
Yeah, there was a store near me that had Turbo Grafx 16 and their games, and I would walk past that aisle. I walked past it a lot, right to the Sega Genesis aisle, and picked up my Genesis games. I do remember looking at the system and just kind of being curious about it, but I knew nobody. I had no exposure to it. I'd never seen it being played. I never saw live footage of, a Turbo Grafx 16 game. Just was not on my radar at all. But yeah, I found out later in life that, man, I missed out on a lot of very good games. And Mark kind of stole my thunder, man. That's one of the deficiencies of the system, is that short controller cord. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so short. I just got my extension in the mail as well. I had to, it's positioned fairly close to me, so I can actually play it without that extension, but it's just not quite comfortable. So yeah, that's one of the other deficiencies I would say about the system. And the reset button thing, though, I think that is true. We were so used to seeing one on the console. By that time, it was weird not to see it on the console. You could hit select and run to reset the system, though. So there was kind of a reset button, but it wasn't.
It's so funny you mentioned that. I just found out that was a thing probably about 2 months ago.
Did you?
This whole time I didn't know. One thing we're talking about the EverDrives is kind of neat is a lot of the EverDrives. I'm not sure if Mark's does, but it has like a little reset button.
It does.
Embedded into the like it's a little mini button, but you can click it to reset the system. And I got so used to doing that, because it's
there you go.
It's in there most of the time, right? But so I think it was somebody from one of the Discords mentioned, like, wow, I didn't even have any clue that was a thing. So that's really cool. Wow. So I guess if they'd done a better job of marketing that, I guess it might have been okay. But it's still a cheap move for them to not put that on.
It was. And you could see a lot of there was corner cutting, I mean, there should have had 2 players out of the box.
Yeah.
But back in the day, it really wasn't on my radar. I did see some commercials and never really paid attention to it. Everybody that I knew, I'm kind of the opposite, Mark, that my circle was Sega Genesis circle. We had an NES as well, but we kind of knew better and were playing the Sega Genesis at that point. And, didn't rely upon the 8-bit technology. But anyway, I honestly, I would, after playing it, I think I agree with you 100%, Jason. It feels 16-bit to me, and I'm gonna, if I had to choose, say, is it 8-bit or 16? I'm going 16. So
yeah, I think the only the one real obvious thing that pops out to me when I was playing it is that there's a somewhat noticeable lack of the parallax scrolling, the multiple scrolling backgrounds that you would see on some of the other I'm using my quotes, are true 16-bit systems.
Yeah.
And I think, but other than that, I don't think there's really much that jumps out at you that screams I'm an 8-bit machine. And in fact, you're going to play some of these titles that we're going to talk about later. You're going to have your mind blown thinking this is 8-bit anything anywhere. They're so good, So yeah, great discussion here. I will mention an interesting story. So even though I was cross shopping the Turbo Grafx 16 when I was first making my 16-bit decision, and I ended up going with the Super Nintendo, as most people probably know. But after I did get the Super Nintendo, I had a friend that for some reason his parents and I might have told this story to you guys like offline one time. You may have heard it, but he had to get all of his electronics through Radio Shack. And so obviously when it came time for him to pick a video game console, he really only had one choice because NEC had some sort of deal with Radio Shack in North America where they would be one of their key distributors. So he had to get his system through Radio Shack, and he got this. And I actually got my chance to hold the controller in my hands and play a couple games through him. He was my one guy, right, that had the Turbo Grafx 16. I think that was around 19, late 90 or something like that we bumped into that. So, but anyway, that was kind of an interesting aside. But one thing I did want to talk about too. I'm sorry, Joel. Do you have something you want to say?
I just was going to throw one more thing in there. If I would have played the system back in the day and saw the games, would have completely changed my mind. But
absolutely, yeah.
Anyway,
and I think that was part of the problem that the guy that I had. I think he had Bonk, and of course he had Keith Courage, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But the games he had weren't exactly. I mean, Bonk's not bad. It's a good game, but there are other games that really kind of push the hardware limits of this thing and make it really shine. And he didn't have those at the time. So I didn't leave thinking I made a bad decision or anything like that. Right. But, one thing I did want to talk about, we kind of open up real quickly for discussions around this, is the controller. And the first thing that really jumps out about this controller is they ate pretty heavily off the NES controller and, I guess the Sega Master System by that time as well. But what did it have that we didn't have on just about anything else at that time? Turbo buttons.
Toggles,
Turbo buttons. And it really kind of like opened up this gray area because, we'd seen the aftermarket controllers that had this, and even like the NES Advantage and things like that had this. And is it cheating? Is it not? But man, this thing came out of the box with turbo switches, man. What am I going to do? Right. Not use it? So I think it kind of was an interesting discussion point for kids, around that time, or young adults, whatever you want to call it, about, can I use the turbos? Do I feel guilty about that? Do I feel dirty? I mean, so let's talk about turbo buttons being included on here on the stock default controller for just a second. Lyndon, go, man. Turbo buttons, love them, hate them, use them, not? What do you think?
Love them. But because I haven't had it but a year and a half or so, sometimes I'll be playing a game and think, man, this will be so much better with.
Yeah. Yes.
I forget sometimes.
Yeah. So you're pro turbo. You're going pro turbo switches, right?
Pro turbo.
All right. Mark, what do you think,
especially
man? Cheap, dirty stuff, dirty pool?
No. Absolutely pro turbo. I mean, it just makes these shooters so much more fun. I will tell you this. Earlier today, when we were playing Bomberman, I didn't realize that I had the turbo switch on, and I was just losing over and over and over again. I didn't know what I was doing. I felt like a complete idiot. I'm like, what did I do? Forget how to play Bomberman? Because we'd start a level, and all of a sudden I just drop a bomb, without even doing anything, or I should say, I'd be trying to press the button, and I think I had to hold the button down to do it. I'm like, this isn't right. What am I? I kept losing round and round.
Some games felt completely broken with them engaged, did they not? Yeah, I remember that.
Oh yeah,
I still encounter that to this day too, right? So
so then I figured that out, and then I turned the tables on my 7-year-old pretty fast.
Yeah,
nice.
All right, we got another pro turbo switches there from Mark. So Joel, go ahead, man. Joel, turbo switches, good, bad, not?
No, man, they're bad. You guys are cheating. I don't know what you guys are talking about. I mean, no, I'm pro turbo. I love the turbo chips on that controller. It's honestly, that's a really, really good controller. Love the D-pad. And there are games, like you say, Mark, where you can't use that turbo there. I mean, they can design the game to where you're not supposed to use the turbo button, and it'll hinder you, if you do. So, no, it's not cheating in my book, and it came out of the box with turbo. So to me, game on, man. It's sanctioned.
I agree.
I love it. It's a great controller. Just if it had the longer cord, it'd have been perfect.
It's a necessity, especially with a small child, because before I got this in the mail, boy, I was sweating every time we would play. It's like, okay, well, let's get up, let's get right next to the TV and play, because I don't want this thing getting pulled off of the table there.
I guess the Japanese were very good at maximizing their space, I guess. So maybe that's where that came from. I'm not sure. And I'm sure they saved a few pennies there too. But
Yeah, because I think they basically artificially grew the size of the Turbo Grafx 16 just to kind of make it more of Western market friendly. You know, that was the thing back then. Everybody thought that you came to the States and you had to, you know, make it bigger and better, you know, and wasn't always necessarily the case because, you know, I was always looking for cool, smaller electronics. That was my thing back in the day, you know, so.
Well, take the Nintendo cartridges where the chip takes up the lower third of the cartridge or whatever, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
The board. Yeah.
And I guess one funny thing to note too, but we're talking about turbo switches and things like that. I don't think that all the iterations of the PC Engine controller had it, right? It was like certain ones had it and certain ones didn't. But by the time it hit the States, we all got it, right? I think it's kind of how it went. So we might have to ask Graphics Gear about that. I'm sure he probably knows about that, right?
Yeah, he seems.
I'm pretty sure that's the case.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
All right. So we're all pro turbo switch. Let's move on here. So what else we got? So let's move into the games because that's where this thing really shines and where I really want to start talking about. Let's talk about one thing before we get into the cool games. Let's talk about one of the major problems this console had when it hit the States. The pack-in game, man. The pack-in game. What was the original pack-in game? Keith Courage and Alpha Zones, right? Yeah. Now that's not a terrible game, but man, it was not the world's best game either. It was a giant mech game, kind of, right, Joel, in a way. I know it wasn't the world's best.
Yeah, it was, and it was a lot of fun when you were underground and you were able to turn into that.
Yeah,
not
as much when you're on the upper levels when you're farming for
you know
for
what
currency, basically. Yeah,
kind of reminds me of the Genesis pack-in game with Altered Beast. You know, a lot of people did not like Altered Beast, and but if you played Keith Courage and got underneath, you got the armor going and the weapons going and the power-ups, man, that game was fun. And I think a lot of people just didn't give it a chance, honestly. But yeah, the overhead, you know, above ground levels, not so great. But if you can hang through those and get through that part of it, get into the underground, it's a lot of fun.
But I think we can all pretty much agree it was probably a mistake to not have a different game be the one that was packed in that, right? So I think most would agree. Any thought, Lyndon or Mark, any thoughts on Keith Courage before we move on to the good games?
I like it. I'm not very good at it, never got very far, but I don't dislike it. But was Bonk ever a pack-in game later?
Well, I know it came out later, and I think they did do some sort of promotions with Bonk later, especially when he started kind of moving into the full-on mascot role for it. I'm not entirely sure if they put one in the box or not, but I know they had like a lot of promotions where if you go ahead and buy the system, we're going to give you 2 or 3 free games or whatever it was. They had a lot of that stuff going on around that time. So good question. I'm not 100% sure on, but
yeah, I'm sorry to say I never played it. Haven't played it yet. I can now.
As of today.
Yep.
All right. So we talked about Keith Courage. Let's talk about some of the games that really kind of made this system shine. And I'm just going to throw a couple out. We'll just kind of have a general discussion. I got noteworthy games listed here. And we'll start with one that I know Joel loves, and we can kind of we'll go from. Actually, I'll throw about 3 out, and we can all have a general discussion. So how about Legendary Axe? All right, we're going to talk about that, and we could talk about the sequel too. Even though I know they're not. It's not really a true sequel, but it's not a bad game either, right? Let's talk about that. Let's throw in the Bonk's Revenge and Bonk's Big Adventure. We'll throw those in there, and then I'm going to throw in one I feel is like an iconic game for the system. I think most people agree. R-Type, R-Type. So let's discuss Legendary Axe, Bonk, and R-Type. I mean, thoughts around those games? There's just some heavy hitters, right? Good games.
Well, speaking of packing games, if they would have packed in Legendary Axe, it would have made a huge difference, in my opinion.
Probably.
That's my favorite game, of course, on the Turbo Grafx 16. But what a great soundtrack! Big pixels, it's a great game. Checks all the boxes. Kind of a Castlevania style game there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Rockin' soundtrack. I think you had that on one of your soundtrack, one of our very early videos where we talked about favorite soundtracks. You had Legendary Axe on there. Did you not, Bill? Okay.
Yep, absolutely. So, yeah, that's my 2 cents. If they would have packed that in, that would have been the perfect pack-in game. And I think I've heard, they're like, well, we don't want to give our best game away. Well, take the cue from Nintendo and Sega. As far as when Sega was packing in Sonic and Super Mario Brothers came with the Nintendo. I just think it would have made a huge difference. If Legendary Axe was your first impression, of the Turbo Grafx 16, it would have changed a lot of people's minds.
I think you're spot on, man. I think you are. So, Mark, Lyndon, what do you guys think about Legendary Axe, Bonk, and R-Type? Anything in there you guys want to talk about? How about Lyndon? You go first, Lyndon.
Those games are great. All three of them are really good on the Turbo Grafx. And Julia India Mobile showed, was it R-Type on the Super CD the other day?
Mm-hmm. I think that was like what R-Type Complete, I believe. Was that what that was?
I think so. I think
so. That one looked great, and it sounded good too. I'd never seen that before. But yes, Legendary Axe definitely should have, or it could have made a big difference, like you say, Joel, with the release of that system, because that was a very popular arcade game, wasn't it?
Yeah. It's got its roots in the arcade anyway. I'll say that. But yeah, and honestly, my favorite place to play R-Type is on the PC Engine or the Turbo Grafx 16.
Yeah, I'm with you.
PC Engine, the chips, it came with 2 different turbo chips. They cut the game in half and basically sold each half. But the Super CD, I burned it. I found a copy of it and played it on the Duo, and it's awesome, man. Yeah, it's R-Type Complete. Great.
I'm with you too. It's one of those games that anytime I fire up the hardware, that one gets played.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mark, any thoughts on any of those? You like Bonk, Mark?
As far as Bonk or Legendary Axe, I'm definitely aware of them. I've seen them, haven't played them. I just got this EverDrive in the mail, and one of the half dozen games that I did try today was R-Type. Very, very enjoyable. Legendary Axe, I know Joel speaks very highly of the game. It's definitely on my list of games close to the top to give a try very, very soon. So yeah, I don't have a lot to add, but I know they're just legendary games.
All right, good stuff. All right, I'm gonna throw out another batch and we're gonna ramble about those for a bit. How about Alien Crush and Devil's Crush? And I'm going to throw out Blazing Lasers, and let's go Newtopia 1 and 2 also too. So Lyndon, you go first. What do you think about those games? Anything really jumping out at you that you like a lot out of that group of 3?
Well, if you like Legend of Zelda, you need to be playing the Newtopia games.
Yeah.
But that's another reason you need one of these.
Mm-hmm.
Neither one of them are cheap.
Right.
Newtopia 2 is $250 loose.
Mm-hmm.
I forget, the first one's probably $100, and then you talk about the shooters.
Also, you have to remember this was made.
Soldier Blade is my favorite so far that I found. Man, it's high too. It's real high.
Yep.
Loose, it's high. A lot of the really good games are.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's why you got to have that.
Mark,
let's see. What were some of the ones you mentioned? Blazing Lasers. I did pick up Gunhead before I got this EverDrive. That was on my list of games I really wanted to get. Phenomenal game. I love that. I do like Soldier Blade a lot. All the Soldier games, right? Superstar Soldier, Soldier Blade. I know it wasn't on the list of the ones you just mentioned. I didn't play Newtopia. I haven't played that yet, but I've heard a lot about that from Josh, Play More Games. Actually, I know it's a Zelda-like game. I've heard a lot of good things about that. And what were some of the other ones that you just mentioned?
Well, I was saving this one for Joel, but Alien Crush and Devil's Crush. So I know Joel's got plenty of good stuff to say about those. But I know you're a video pinball fan as well. So
I did play some Devil's Crush today. Had a lot of fun with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
a lot of fun with that. That was a good game.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, Joel, you want to?
Yeah.
Dig into these video pinball games here.
Yeah, absolutely.
There we go.
And I'm glad I got this one. This is one of them that I do have that's actually complete. Well, in case I don't have the box, unfortunately, but huge fan of both Crush games. And I don't know why, but I kind of just tend to choose Alien Crush. Maybe, I don't know why, but there is more going on in Devil's Crush, and I would think a lot of people like Devil's Crush better, but you cannot beat either one of those pinball games, man. You like video pinball, even if you're casual, you casually like video pinball, you'll have fun with both those games.
Absolutely.
Completely missed out on those, of course, like with the rest of the games for the Turbo Grafx 16 back in the day. But yeah, that's what's kind of fun about the Turbo Grafx 16 to me, is discovering these games that you missed out on and going, man, where were those? And having fun with them for the first time. And Absolutely. So Alien Crush was one of those games for me. Blazing Lasers you brought up. Yep. That's my favorite shoot 'em up right now. Favorite. It's the best.
Yeah, so. I think Mark was tired of you and I talking about that game so much on all of our chats and discussions. So, but I have nothing but great things to say about Blazing Lasers too. I think it does everything so well. It really remedies that Gradius problem of wanting to kick your controller across the room when you lose your power ups. Because they have more ready to go as soon as you come back in, and that was just such an awesome way to handle that. And so many great shoot 'em ups on this system. Less so in the American library than there will be when we talk about the Japanese one, but they're always there for you. So good stuff. Yeah, we'll do one more batch of. Go ahead, Mark. Go ahead.
I just want to say one thing real quick that I noticed today, testing out all those. I love the system for, I should say the EverDrive for testing out all those awesome shooters, such as Blazing Lasers and Star Soldier and what are some of the others, Superstar Soldier, Soldier Blade, all that stuff.
Anything with Soldier, pretty much, right?
Exactly, all the Soldier games. The one thing that I noticed that they have in common is that right out of the gate, they give you a taste of every power-up. I found that to be very interesting. They give you like one after the other, so you can kind of like see everything and kind of learn, oh, that's the one I like the most. I'm going to be on the lookout for that. And then, you inevitably get something you don't like, then you're like, okay, I got to be on the lookout for the number 3 weapon. That's the good one. That's the one I like. But within 10 seconds, you've almost seen all that stuff, which is kind of cool in my opinion.
Absolutely.
And I'm a casual fan of shoot 'em ups. I'm not some kind of pro, and there's a lot of games you'll play and you just get discouraged and quit, So Blazing Lasers, if you're casual and you like shoot 'em ups but you're not real great at them, that's a great entry level to the shoot 'em up genre. Blazing Lasers.
Yeah.
So
it's not
tons
too
of power
overpowering.
ups.
Yeah.
It really isn't. So yeah. Just had to throw that 2 cents in.
Oh, yeah. Spot on. Let's throw out another batch of heavy hitters, and then we'll talk about some weak spots in the library here. Let's throw out Splatterhouse, Bloody Wolf, and Ninja Spirit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, right. So I'll start with this one and just say, I think all these games are great, right? And I think that Splatterhouse might be the most iconic game on the Turbo Grafx 16 for a lot of different reasons, and it is a good game. It is a really good game. But I do probably think that Ninja Spirit's probably a better game. Probably, I got to say that's the real deal, man. That game is awesome. And again, you talk about. I know this one. I think this came out a little bit later, but had you had a game like this package with the system, man, you're talking a completely different story here, possibly. And Bloody Wolf, you guys know I like Akari Warriors. I get made fun of a lot on that one, but I'll take Akari Warriors over a lot of games. And I thought Bloody Wolf was a good Akari Warriors-ish type game. So
yeah.
But Lyndon, you got any thoughts on any 3 of those titles? Splatterhouse, Bloody Wolf, and Ninja Spirit?
I agree. The Bloody Wolf reminds me of Akari Warriors, but better. It's really fun. I really like that game. Splatterhouse, definitely iconic. I could play that all day. Mm-hmm. And Ninja Spirit's one of the best games on the whole system. I love that. Mm-hmm. That is so awesome.
I'm taking notes.
Yeah, mark that one down, Mark. You got to have that one.
Didn't you
play Ninja Spirit?
Didn't you beat Ninja Spirit on one of your videos? Didn't you play all the way?
I did.
Yeah.
And I learned of it from watching one of your videos. You showed it a while before I ever got one. I was like, man, that looks fun. And when I played that, the way it controls and all the power ups you get, wow, that is so fun.
Yep.
All right, so Mark, you just have all those in the queue, basically, is what you said, huh?
Man, tomorrow's Saturday. You can guess what I'm doing all weekend. Of course, I played Splatterhouse. It was the first game that I tested out the system when I finally got it up and running, and boy, what a thrill that was to see the system get resurrected and to play Splatterhouse. Mm-hmm. Excellent. I was aware of its iconic nature. And there's some history there, right, with blood and gore, and
I think it had a very rudimentary
Taboo
parental
at the time.
advisory too. One of the first
Yeah.
ones that was actually on a game. So
Right. So yeah, it's a thrill to play, and especially knowing its history. And as for the other two, yeah, like I said, I got a long weekend here coming up.
yeah. All right, Joel, what do you think? I know you got some heavy hitters that some of your favorites in that list. So
yeah, man. Of course
oh yeah.
I'm repping. Ninja Spirit is that. I didn't think of that. That would have been a great pack-in game too.
Yeah, it would have been.
That it's an awesome game, and when you look at it and you look at the arcade version side by side, I mean, it's not perfect, but it's pretty close. And it's kind of like having one of those. It's real nostalgic to me because it's kind of like having one of those really old arcade games in your home when you start playing it. It's just a blast, and it's not overly hard or real tough. It's a challenge, but you kind of got to figure out those weapons, when to use the weapons, what enemies to use certain weapons on. So it really took advantage of that mechanic and was excellent. And that was kind of ahead of its time, really, back in the day. So yeah, absolutely. Now I've got the kind of GIMP version of Splatterhouse. I got the US version, but there's some differences there with the Japanese version. I think the Japanese version, they have the white mask. The American version has the red mask. And there was a few other differences there too, as far as some of the graphics and stuff like that. But and then of course I can't show you Bloody Wolf because it's playing right now, man.
Yeah.
I see that.
As a fan of Contra games, any type of run and gun, Bloody Wolf is awesome. And there's a twist. There's a plot twist in this game. A little bit of a plot twist, and you can continue. I think you have infinite continue. So I mean, you can just sit down and just keep going at it.
Hey, it is like Akari Warriors.
There you go. But in the ABBA or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a lot of fun, and even if you do play through it and use continues, you want to go back and actually improve your score and do it better, and it's a lot of fun. So I think all three of those games, if some of us back in the day would have been exposed to them, we'd have a completely different opinion on the Turbo Grafx 16. So
I agree. All right, so we covered some heavy hitters. There's some things that Turbo Grafx didn't do well, and we'll just touch on that quickly. But sports games were not really its forte. You had the kind of relatively weak TV sports series, I think is what it's called, and there was Power Golf and a couple others, but there weren't a lot of like memorable sports titles for this one. And you know what? I don't think it's really hurt it because sports titles usually don't age well anyway. So I think where this console does things really well is the ones that we tend to go back and kind of really celebrate. These platformers and RPGs and things like that. The things that it did well really helped it age well, I think, as well. So, but yeah, I've got a couple other on the list here. Some Kung Fu clones, Vigilante, and also what was the other one that was like a Jackie Chan style game? Forget the name. China Warrior. Yeah. So those were solid but not spectacular games. So it wasn't all home runs, right? There were some singles out there too. And I would definitely consider those games, but still definitely worth going back and playing, especially you being the Jackie Chan fan that you are. You might be able to find some sort of some sort of enjoyment out of those, Mark. So put those on the queue, but deeper in the queue, right? So
yeah.
All right. So
great big sprites about as tall as your screen.
Yes,
exactly. That's the one.
China Warrior. Yeah.
That's the one.
Yeah.
China Warrior. Yeah. So let's talk about two things here once here because we're going a little long here, but let's talk about the PC Engine and differences that maybe happened there. Some games that were offered there that weren't offered on the Turbo Grafx, and then we'll kind of segue into the whole CD thing pretty quickly and talk about that because that's a pretty big deal, right? This was the first home console to introduce CD technology like that, and that's that actually stuck with us for quite some time. To this day, we're still sticking discs in the system, not necessarily having to do it anymore, but there's still that option. So anyway. Let's talk about that. So the PC Engine obviously was smaller. We talked about how they grew this for the Western market. And I really like the looks. Mark, if you want to hold up that white, that kind of traditional PC Engine there for everybody there, I think that looks really cool, man. I think that's probably the most iconic version of the PC Engine right there in your hands, that white one. good looking. Now they went through some iterations there with the Core Grafx and the Core Grafx 2. But I always thought that was the one. Yeah. Yeah.
What is the difference?
Well, there's subtle little changes there in the hardware, and I don't even have all of them itemized right here. Yeah, exactly. I think there were some differences in the
this is
things.
Yeah, this is just RF, and I believe the Core Grafx has you can get composite.
Yeah, composite. Yeah. I had the Core Grafx, and that's one of the big changes. One of the reasons I went with the Core Grafx back when I was looking at the PC Engine. But they're going to play the same games, but you get that composite.
Yep,
absolutely.
All those models are nice looking.
Oh yeah, I think that hands down they probably beat this one in the looks department, right?
Yeah,
I mean, just because that there's something so svelte and small and compact about that. And again, even back in the 80s and 90s, I dug that. I was going for that. I didn't want something that looked the size of a stereo receiver, So. But yeah, and then we didn't get the full library that was ported over. So obviously Japan had quite a few titles that we didn't get, and some very interesting ones. There was a really good Shinobi port, the arcade game Shinobi, that came to the PC Engine that we never saw in Western markets, and it was actually probably one of the most faithful translations of the arcade games that I played on a home console until they started doing the built-in emulation. So there was that. We had Salamander, which was known as Life Force on the NES. I don't believe we got that one here in Western audiences, Western markets. And Star Parodio, we didn't get that one. Altered Beast. Altered Beast had a really interesting port on there as well. So really, they left some stuff in Japan that we didn't get, and I guess that's okay because now we have these EverDrives and things like that. We can very easily switch over and check those out. But and obviously you can get some of this stuff relatively cheaper than trying to buy the American versions, but you will have to get either an adapter or mod your hardware if you get this guy right here. So that is one thing to keep in mind if you want to go that route. But let's talk about the CD-ROM because we've talked about what a big deal that was when it came out. Let's talk about some of the games here because you got some real heavy hitters on here, right? Let's and we talked about Japan versus US. They left some pretty big ones out though, didn't they? And the first one that comes to mind is Rondo Blood. We didn't get that one here, and what a great game that was. I mean, how did that not make it here? I'm not sure, but it didn't. And you guys want to give quick thoughts on Rondo Blood? I mean, Lynn,
oh yeah, that was I just had made a trade with Juliet in India Mobiles. Jake over there, and got the PC Engine Duo. And one of the reasons I wanted that is because it comes with the CD and the CD player. And first game I found and played on that was Rondo Blood. And there's something just really cool about playing that game on original hardware. Man, it's good. Yeah, I completely overlooked it. Played Symphony of the Night, loved it, and it hasn't toppled Symphony of the Night in my book, but it's probably a solid 2 right there. And there's a lot of people that would disagree with me on that, but Rondo Blood is excellent. Great graphics. The soundtrack will stay with you. After you play it, you'll hear it in your head, man. It's so good. Yeah, absolutely. We completely missed out on that game back in the day. So
yeah, Lyndon, have you given that one a go?
No, I don't have
you don't have the CD
or a CD. I didn't even know there was a super CD thing. A lot of that's still new to me. Joel getting the PC Engine Duo has kind of opened my eyes, and man, I'm like, ooh, I'd really like to have one of those.
yeah, the CD-ROM stuff is really cool.
And see some of these games that I didn't even know were out there for the Super CD thing, and that we never got. And man, it's very interesting.
If you go into that, just make sure you do your research on what iterations of the system will play what games and what cards you need. And exactly.
Bring your decoder ring because you will need it.
Yeah. The PC Engine Dual is nice because it has a couple of those cards built right into the system, so you don't have to worry about it. But that you want to play those arcade pro games, you gotta have the card for it.
Have the arcade
put the card in one side and you put the CD in the other, and it'll play. You don't have that card in, and
Are the cards expensive to get these days, or?
I think around the arcade card, I think was around $50. maybe
And
more
there's-
now.
What about the Super CD card?
That one I haven't checked on lately. Jason, you got any?
Yeah, I have this is the Arcade Pro right here, this one. And I think this is generally considered the top dog one. And I think the last time I checked, it's going for about 160 or something like that, 150, 160. Depends on if you want the case and everything with it as well. But there's certain games that you still can't play. Like, again, you got to check your decoder ring very carefully. This one's generally considered, and just for everybody following along at home, this basically goes in and inserts like a game and operates the CD-ROM, like almost like this is like the system BIOS for the CD-ROM. And the CD-ROM would mount to the back of this right here. And this plugs in right here. And there's multiple different versions of these, right, that play certain games. So anyway, that's kind of what that is. And some of them go for varying different prices. I think that's probably the most expensive one right now. I think everything under that is a little bit cheaper. So again, you just got to figure out what games you want. And I think there's one specific game that only plays on the 1.0 cards, like one game, I think, or something like that. But just do a little bit of research and you'll find out which one you need, which games you want to play, which one fits for you, and you get that all sorted out. But
does the Turbo CD have all those cards and stuff? The one that plugs into the back of the Turbo Grafx, does it have all that going on with it?
Well, yeah, it depends on that. So you're stuck in that world if you want to put one on the So this is actually the one that I pulled out of my collection, and I actually pulled this out of the interface unit that has the CD-ROM on the back. So it would have sat right here normally, right? And it's over here in the console. But what you would do is you take one of these cards and plug it in. But here's the thing with yours, Lyndon, your EverDrive can actually do a lot of that right now out of the box. And in fact, when I sent that to you, I made sure that you had an image of each one of these on your EverDrive, so you could queue it up that way and play it that way. So you might not even have to worry about buying these.
There you go.
Yeah, you just got to worry about getting the hardware, right? And that's another concern, right? So you got to get the CD-ROM and the interface unit. But ping me offline and we'll talk about that, because I think you may have what you need already and you're loaded up there in your EverDrive. So
hey.
Yeah, good stuff.
I'm
glad you brought it up.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, we talked about games, and I'm gonna throw this one out here, talking about Japanese games that didn't make it over here, and I have no idea why it didn't. But Street Fighter II Champion Edition may be one of the best ports of that game on this hardware. Like, you're talking about, it's 8-bit, this and that. Man, you play that game and you come back and tell me that this is a 8-bit weak system or something like that, I guarantee you will not. It is an awesome. I was a huge Champion Edition is my favorite version of Street Fighter 2 in this system, or the PC Engine, whichever one you're playing it on, however you're playing it. It's one of the best, man. It's one of the best. It might not be the best, but it's definitely up there, and it is a quality representation of that game through and through. So how did we not get that one here? I don't know. We didn't, though. I guess it was kind of one of those things that was just too late, and they thought the Turbo Grafx was too far gone to bring it over here, but we didn't get it. So,
and they do sell a 6-button controller that you can use with that too.
So, you know what? And I beat the game using the standard 2 button, so it is possible. Yeah, for everybody out there that says you can't do it, you'll get pretty quick with hitting that run button, man, and switch those banks, man, and you'll figure out a way, man. And it was pretty interesting. There's some creative button mapping that has to go on there, but it can be done. So give it a shot and just try it
earlier today.
Yeah, try it.
There you go.
Then lastly, Strider. Let's talk about the CD games. Strider has a really interesting, solid port from what's an awesome arcade game. Now Genesis did it great too. Don't get me wrong, but this one's up there, man. It's a good port. But again, left in Japan, right? So you would have to figure out how you could get that played. But I do recommend you play it. There's actually a bonus stage in there that isn't on anywhere else. So interesting stuff. So. And then, lastly, I'll just throw this one out here and we'll kind of close up. But Ys Book 1 and 2, I know I don't have much experience with those games, but I know there are people out there that swear by those as being some of the basically some of the best on the system, and some of the best RPGs ever made, those types of conversations. So anybody got any thought on Ys Book 1 and 2?
I've played a little bit, and the first part that I played through was awesome. It looks like something that I'll really enjoy, but I just haven't had the time to put into it. But it's solid action RPG. Very different, but it's cool. Yeah, very good game. One other game that I would mention that got left in Japan, great game, and that's Double Dragon 2 as well.
Absolutely, that's a good one too. I didn't even have it on my list, but you're right. You're spot on. That is a good one.
Great game. Anyway,
All right. Well, I'll tell you what. We'll close up with just quick thoughts on the overall legacy, like what, I mean, is there an indelible kind of imprint that the PC Engine and Turbo Grafx have made on gaming as a whole that lasts to this day? And you can say no, and I'll let Lyndon, you want to go first? What are your thoughts on that?
I think definitely so, because so many of us did not have it back then. Yep. And it's just getting more and more popular. I mean, you can look on price charting and look at the prices of these things, and I have to tell you, because there's not as many of the games for this as there are the NES. They never made never as many systems. And I think that is part of the appeal. Like I said, we just didn't have that back then. And when you're an adult, you can buy what you want.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I've had a great time going back and playing this. And I know it's very popular with all of us in our group and beyond. So just happy to have this and have a way to play this library. Just having a blast with it.
Yeah,
I'm glad to see you found a good home.
I would say it seems to me like, everybody likes an underdog, and this system is like, it doesn't really get talked about as part of the console wars. It's always Nintendo and Sega, but this system, I mean, it was one of the first things you said on the phone call was, the system was right there with it, but, kind of just off on the sidelines, but basically every bit capable as the Genesis and the Super Nintendo, more or less. Just I don't know. To me, it's sort of like this underdog system that I just want to learn so much more about, because I was just clueless about it.
Yeah. So maybe a little bit of TBD there for you, right? Stay tuned for Mark, right?
Yeah.
We'll come back and revisit. Joel, what do you think the Turbo Grafx and PC Engine's legacy is today?
Well, it's got a huge legacy in Japan, I'll tell you that. Huge hit there, tons of games, tons of different console versions, and had a longer lifespan, and did very well. But I think the legacy now here is kind of in the retro gaming community discovering this system that they missed out on back in the day, and finding out how great it is and how our opinions change over time after playing the games, man, after experiencing it and playing some of those games in the library that are really good games. So, and they snuck into the NES library. We have Adventure Island, and we had Bonk. And then, the Crush games kind of got in the Genesis library and had a little bit of a name change, but same game. And so,
well, even in reverse, we got Ninja Gaiden from NES into the PC Engine, right? That was an interesting take on that too. So it kind of worked both ways, but
absolutely,
I get you, and I agree with you. And I think if anything, this console's legacy is that software is king. You can talk about hardware all day long and this and that, where it was in the context of history, but we're talking about this system today because it had great games that were made for it that still to this day shine. And they're still enjoyable. And I think they look great. I mean, sprite-based games have aged really well. And I think that's really what you can kind of circle back to and say is the system's legacy, is that software is where it's at, man. Make the games. People will come. People will play them. So
it's almost stronger now than it was when it came out.
I think so. I think you're right. I think it's a system that's still kind of on the ascend because of this whole retro gaming thing. I think it's going to continue to grow, I think. So All right, guys. Well, I think we beat this one pretty much to death. And if you stayed with us till the end, we appreciate that for sure. And if you have any comments about anything we just said, or did we forget something? I'm sure we did. There was a lot to cover, but post it in the comments below and we'll be glad to chat with you. And I don't know whose turn it is next time, but you're going to have a tough time topping this one, right? We had some fun.
Always a good time.
It was, a blast.
Yeah. So stay tuned and we'll catch you next time. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.